Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, taking you through championship week as we sit here in Lucas Oil Stadium, the site of the Big Ten championship game between Oregon and Penn State, Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You can watch it on CBS. All right, let's turn our attention to Charlotte, North Carolina, as Danny Kanell calls it, real football, the ACC.
Let's go. Here we go.
Clemson and SMU, two teams that didn't get to play each other. We worked all of the doomsday scenarios of everybody finishes undefeated. That wasn't the case. Miami loses twice. Clemson loses to Louisville. But SMU did the thing. They seized on an opportunity of a weak conference schedule, or a favorable conference draw, if we're going to be a little bit more correct about this. But they're 8-0. And now they're playing to try to win the ACC in their first year of being in the conference. What has impressed you about SMU? What do they need to do in this game?
I mean, if Kirk Cignetti doesn't exist, Rhett Lashley's in the conversation for Coach of the Year. I mean, what he's done has been phenomenal. And I always thought SMU would be good eventually in the ACC, maybe year 2 or 3. To do it in year 1, and you mentioned, yes, Florida State has been awful. That helped them get a big win against Florida State. They didn't have to play Miami. They didn't have to play Clemson in the regular season. But they have still beat some pretty good teams. And I know they don't get credit for beating Duke because it's Duke, but Duke finished 9-3. That's a pretty good win. The thing that's impressed me is obviously we knew about Rhett Lashley as an offensive mind. I thought making the switch from a starter last year in Preston Stone, who was back, that's always a tough dynamic to do when you bench a starter, to make that decision saying, I think we can still get better. He does it to Kevin Jennings, and it works. But I also think their defense, maybe what we're not talking about enough, their defense has been really physical. They've been able to get up to speed as far as size and physicality, making the jump from the American to the ACC. I don't know, people would make fun of the ACC, but it still is a jump, and they have not missed a beat. And I think it's been really, really impressive.
Yeah, SMU's been making me feel pretty stupid all year. In the offseason, I was with you. I didn't think they were going to just show up to the ACC and do what they have done. Clearly they have. They're favored in the ACC Championship game. They didn't just get there. They're favored over Clemson, the program that has pretty much dominated that league for a few years. So every single week I feel like I was waiting, especially early in the year. I was like, all right, well, they're going to lose. They're going to fall off. It's going to happen. Then the BYU loss comes, and I'm sitting there thinking I'm really, really smart. There I am. I'm awesome. But they just keep winning. And Kevin Jennings, I think, has been a revelation for them. I think he has greatly improved that offense. You mentioned their defense. They don't get nearly enough credit for how good that they have played. But I do think this is a very interesting matchup for them because you mentioned the Duke win, which is a good win for them. It's also the best defense they have faced this season, and it was their worst performance on offense. They turned the ball over 6 times. Duke missed 2 field goals. That matters in a 1-point game. So going into this matchup against Clemson, which I think is a better defense, or at least on par with Duke as far as talent, it's going to be really interesting to see what Kevin Jennings and this offense are able to do against this team in this spotlight. Outdoors in Charlotte, might be cold, might be rainy. It's going to be an interesting situation.
There's no doubt their defense is better than we thought it was going to be. They have a lot of those guys who were good players on those old Manny Diaz Miami teams. Obviously, Manny kind of handed it to him there with Duke, and SMU got the win. But they have not faced a lot of, let's say, better than functional offenses on the year. And I think that leaves open a question. It's weird to play a 14-game schedule, but when they played Louisville, who else do we think is legitimately a functional offense they've played? Florida State was a total mess when they played them. They played Cal with they got Cal without Mendoza. Mm-hmm. Duke's offense is pretty much hot garbage all year.
Pitt was about to fall off the cliff.
They faced Boston College's backup, Grayson James, and he actually handed it to him for about 3 quarters, and SMU ended up pulling away and winning the ball game. So there is a chance that this SMU defense is a bit of a paper tiger. There's no doubt they handle teams that they destroy teams that are not functional offense, but Louisville scored it on them pretty well. We don't really know how they're going to handle a good to very good offense. I think Clemson's offense is, at least from a baseline standpoint, good.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Maybe their biggest win of last weekend was not having to face Miami's offense, because that could have been a shootout of epic proportions. Clemson's offense doesn't exactly. They've been better, and Cade Klubnik has been good, but again, they're not something that strikes a ton of fear in you.
Do they? Because Clemson's offense has a higher ceiling than what they have hit.
Yes.
A lot.
Yes.
And they've had offensive line issues. That means it's tougher to run the ball with Phil Maffa, which we always thought would be a battering ram, but sometimes that run game just disappears, as it did in their loss against Louisville earlier this season. Do you see Clemson having success against that SMU defense?
Depends on what Clemson you get.
I mean,
right?
like,
it's been such a
Brian
roller coaster
Wesco,
ride,
you know,
right?
Browningstool. Like, there are so
Moffa's
many
a really
different
good
pieces.
back. Yeah,
it just doesn't click all the time.
It doesn't. But if they do, that's when it gets dangerous. I think the key to this offense is Cade Klubnik's legs. Like, he's really kind of found something, and I think the big run against Pitt was huge. A 55-yard winning touchdown. He kind of gets loose a little bit. I think he's played more aggressively. He's played like a playmaker for a lot of the season. I think that's what SMU needs to be careful of. And it's funny because I think Clemson has to do the same thing with Kevin Jennings. But even in the potential game-winning drive that Clemson had, if you notice, a lot of those plays were Cade Klubnik scrambles just for a few yards, extending, getting first downs, extending plays. That, to me, is what's going to be the key. And what version of Cade Klubnik? He's been a lot better this year, but it hasn't been something that a lot of people have noticed because of the 3 losses.
I think Cade's one of those guys where the more he's running, the better he plays.
Yep.
Like, I think it just helps him settle down somehow, get into the rhythm and flow of the offense when he's using his legs, whether it's by design or by scrambling. Like, when he's sitting in the pocket and he's not being used as a runner, I feel like that is when he has been at his worst. That is not really where you want him. So I think it's going to be very important for Clemson to use him in that role early in this game, get him going, and just really test the limits of this SMU defense, because as you were saying, it's not as if they have gone through a barrage of high-powered offenses. Test the spot, test them all over, see where you can find the weaknesses, see where you can take advantage of, because talent-wise, Clemson has an advantage here.
And there is difference. Like our friend Bill Connolly calls it covariant, right? Some people are really good against bad and they smash bad, and when they face good, it's just a different thing. There are certain things schematically you can do against certain level of competition that you can't pull off against something else. And Clemson moved the ball kind of decently at times on South Carolina, which from a defensive line standpoint is probably the best in the country or damn near. SMU's got a nice D-line. Like they get after you pretty well. They can play aggressive, but they don't have the same body types that a South Carolina has. And Clemson held up against them a little bit better than I thought they would. So I do think Clemson can move and score.
You know what I'm looking at in this game? Because we make so much about Dabo Swinney and the transfer portal and how he doesn't use it. And he always comes back to his high school recruiting, his development, what we have coming up. Because TJ Parker is a sophomore defensive lineman who does a great job of causing problems for opposing quarterbacks. Sammy Brown is a freshman who's really emerged. Davion Terrell is a sophomore. I think that defense could be a big difference maker. The Clemson defense could be a big difference maker in this game.
They better tackle because SMU is one of the top teams yards after the catch. I think they have 1,900 yards after the catch, and they like to get it in their receivers' hands, quick passes, get them on the run. Clemson has to tackle in order to contain that SMU offense.
Who, in your mind, has SMU faced defensively who has real defensive line bodies?
Louisville's not bad.
Right.
Yeah, Ashton Gelati.
They handled that. Florida State, I'm going to go back to the FSU
Farmer
game.
was the healthy, right?
Farmer and Jackson were healthy. They actually they messed up SMU for about 40 minutes in that game.
Oh, BYU.
BYU did it to them, too. So we don't. One of our major worries was the offensive line questions for SMU entering the season. If we can go back to our preseason priors, which feels like forever ago. But again, I do think there's a difference in facing big-time defensive linemen. It's just not something you can really simulate or see in these other games. So there's a chance Clemson's guys step up and overwhelm SMU here.
Who wins?
I'm going Clemson.
Clemson.
It's an ACC Championship game.
That's kind of where I'm at too.
Yeah.
There's some. This is what we do. This is who we are. We literally do it in this building in this same Saturday night, early December, cold outside. I like. Think it'll be a home field advantage. I like the Tigers.
I hate this because I feel like we're doing what I hate what everybody does. Like, you're going with the brand. Like, they've got to be better. Although SMU is favored, but I'm on Clemson too. I kind of want it to happen, though. I want a close Clemson win, and SMU is in.
And Alabama's out.
I didn't say that.
All right. Well, coming up on the other side, we know the college football playoff implications in the Big 12. It is win and in. So what are we looking for in that matchup between Arizona State and Iowa State? All that and more next.